And welcome back to the Common Gourmet. So when I was trying to decide what to do for the video this week, I thought I'd go with something baked. My first thought was Snickerdoodles because where I come from, originally I'm from just outside of Kansas City. And everybody there knows what a Snickerdoodle is. Everybody likes Snickerdoodles. And when I got up here, a lot less people knew what they were, but every time I make them, everybody likes them. But I thought Snickerdoodles is a pretty basic cookie. They're all right. I like them. They're one of my favorites. But I wanted to do something a little different, and I just happened to be surfing around online, and I found a recipe. And the recipe was for Snickerdoodle Scones. I thought, well, that's got to mean something right there. Talking about Snickerdoodles in my head, and then boom, there's Snickerdoodle Scones on the internet. So I had, before this video, I had not made them before. I don't even know what webpage the recipe came off of. I was just surfing around, saw it, wrote it down, and went on. So this is going to be the first time I've made them. I know a lot of people in the U.S. are not as familiar with scones as maybe a few other people are, or a few other countries are. I think the general thought in the U.S. about scones is that's a British thing. And then up here in Canada, I see it a lot more prevalent. I've never made them before, so I thought, hey, let's give it a shot. So I got to looking at the recipe, and really and truly, it reads just pretty much like a biscuit recipe back home. So when I went to make them, I didn't have any actual butter. So I altered the recipe just a little bit. I normally try and follow the recipe as close as possible the first time out of the gate. But this time we changed it a little bit. But they turned out good. A few tips and tricks on maybe what to do different next time. And they were great with our friend coffee. So let's go make some scones. All right, let's make some scones here. In the bowl, I have my dry ingredients pre-mixed together. Check down at the bottom for the recipe for that. On the plate, I have a half cup of lard cut into cubes, and it's cold. Now, if you have butter, you can use butter. If you don't have butter or lard, you can use margarine, preferably the block margarine. The tub stuff tends to not hold up as well under this kind of an application, but it will work if you have nothing else. So we're going to cut that into the dry mixture till you get to that coarse crumb look. See how when I squeeze it, it held together, but it crumbles immediately? That's what you're looking for. Here I've got a half cup of sour cream and an egg that's been pre-mixed. Beat them together a little while ago. They've been in the fridge ever since. This all needs to be cold. You do not want your fat melting. Now all you're going to do is just kind of give this a stir up until everything comes together. And you're going to mix this, and you're going to look at it, and you're going to go, oh, that's not enough wet. This is never going to come together. You're going to mix for a while like I did, and you're going to see the bottom and go, there's just all this loose or dry stuff on the bottom. This is never going to work. Yes, it will. You just got to give it a little time. And this is also one of the other reasons you want things to be cold. Just like with a biscuit, if the fat melts, then this whole thing starts becoming a little too moist, and then it's very hard to work with. Plus, it doesn't get as good a crumb or flake when you get to baking with it. So once you see that it's mostly wet, get in there with your hands and work it a little bit. You want to knead it a few times just to make sure everything's combined until it comes up into a nice ball. If you like, you can do this in the food processor too, by the way. If you do quick pulses, you can pre-mix your stuff, pre-do the crumb, throw the sour cream and egg mixture in just till it comes together. But you have to be careful with that. Now we're going to lightly flour I prefer using a board, but my board broke, so we're just using the counter. You're going to want to pat this out into roughly an 8-inch circle. It doesn't have to be perfect. Doesn't even have to be a circle. But I find that they bake a little bit better this way, I think. So I like to flatten up my edge so that it's a little more square. If it bulges too much, I think even with like a biscuit or a biscuit type dough, it'll burn if it's too thin on the outer edge. So we're going to clear that off. You don't want too much flour on there, but it's hard to work with if you don't at least have a little bit going. Now, a nice sharp knife. Not having done this particular before, I tapped it once. Didn't really need it. It was good and soft, so just cut through it. Cut it into wedges. About 8's fine. Really, you can cut it into however many you want, but I think this is what the original recipe called for, and this is about the size of ones that I see in the store. I think this is probably just a prime size for baking, to getting them evenly done. So we have a parchment lined baking sheet here. We're just going to toss those on there real quick to get them out of the way, because I do have a little bit limited workspace. We're going to bake these together. Now, I was unsure whether they should be separated or touching. I baked mine separated. If the picture is any indication that I saw online, they should probably be touching, because they did tend to bulge a bit on the sides as they baked. Now, the original recipe called for just a sprinkling of cinnamon and sugar on top of these. That's just not enough for me. If I'm going to have a snickerdoodle, I want some cinnamon and sugar on it. So what we're going to do is I'm going to just dump it out on a plate there, so I can just kind of give them a quick toss on like that. Hit the sides a little bit. Now the first two I did just straight up like they said. And I went, well, that's alright. But there's just really not a whole lot sticking to it. So we're going to try my method. Turn the water on and just give it a little quick pat down with some water. You don't want them soaking, you just want them damp on the top, so the cinnamon and sugar will help stick to it a little bit better. Went ahead and gave them all just a, that's the sink there, just a little running water, a little cold water, just spread it on. You can use your fingers, you can use a pastry brush, you can use a spoon, whatever you want, doesn't matter. It's your food, do what you want with it. So as you can see here, we're going to start rolling these up, and you'll notice that they will look a little darker than their predecessors. You can see more cinnamon and sugar has stuck to them. And in the end, I'm going to toss even more on. Now, you'll note in the recipe, there is nutmeg in the batter. There is nutmeg in the drizzle that comes later. Unless you're a huge fan of nutmeg, I would cut those in about half. I'm giving you the original recipe because, well, that's the original recipe. And I haven't altered it much. So I'm giving you what I did. But I would go with almost half of the amount of nutmeg. Nutmeg for me is okay, but it's, nothing hoo-ah. So we're just going to sprinkle some of the more of that on top. I like, a good coating of the cinnamon and sugar on it. I think it helps give it flavor. Plus, this is not an overly sweet dough. It's a slightly sweet, but it's not terribly sweet. So it would have been a little too close to just plain without. So I threw the extra sugar on. Like I said, these were perfect with a cup of coffee. Not too sweet, not too non-sweet. They were just about right. So those have now baked for exactly 16 minutes. It varies for your oven. 16 to 18, or 15 to 18 technically is what the original recipe said. Mine went for 16. It looked good. They like I said, they bulged a little bit on the side, but they browned nicely on the bottom. Yeah, they're nice and hot there. Yeah. So we're going to give these a little bit of time to cool, so the drizzle doesn't just, melt and run off. Now, if you're familiar with a glaze, that's basically what we're making here. Powdered sugar, cinnamon, and nutmeg. Then I'll throw 2 tablespoons of milk into it. After we get it, all the powders kind of mixed together here. Really and truly, a lot of people I know have said, well, I don't like glazes because it tastes like powdered sugar. Yes, as soon as you get done making it, it has that powdery taste. A glaze needs to set. It needs for all the flavors to have time to blend and meld before you start noticing less of the powdered sugar flavor and more of what you're going for, unless you cook it. Which one of these days I may do my donut recipe, and then there's a cooked glaze for those. It's really nice. Now I had to put just a little bit more milk in. For those of you in the States, you're probably going, your milk's in a bag. Yeah, I know, it was weird when I got up here, but I've gotten very used to it. So you want this at a consistency that's enough to squeeze out and kind of, drizzle, but not so thin that it's runny, but not so thick that you have to, like, force it out. See how it just kind of drizzled off the whisk there? No, I didn't taste that whisk. No. Now, this is just a plain zip top bag, and all I've done is put it in a clean glass and folded the top down so that I can just easily pour it in. It's just like pouring it into the glass. This is great if you're doing glazes or even like a piping dough. I don't have a piping bag, so I use the zip top bags, and this just makes it so easy to get in without any huge mess. And when you're done with that, you just clear your space, as I'm doing there. Pick up the zip top. Everything's inside. Zip it up. You're good to go. Go Shrek. Okay. I like to get as much of the air out as I can. It just helps it to squeeze. But if you have a big old clump of air in as you're squeezing, if it gets in between the exit and your whatever you're messing with, you get this big bloop of air, and it's a problem. A little snippet there, and just take the tip of that off. You now have a piping bag. Now, these zip top bags, we just buy them from the dollar store because, well, there's no point in buying expensive ones for stuff like this, so I tend to roll up the zipper down into it so it doesn't get too much pressure on it. Alright. This, how much you drizzle, how you drizzle it in a pattern is entirely up to you. I just went around and around a little bit and got everything a little coated. I had some extra. A little bit later I put a little bit more on. A couple of them, not a lot. But once again, it's your food. You do what you want with it. If you want these things absolutely covered, then absolutely cover them. If you just want the barest of drizzle, then just put the barest of drizzle on. That's the great thing about food. You're making it, it's yours. You do what you want with it. And there we have Snickerdoodle Scones. These would be great with tea. They were great with coffee. If you you can add nuts to this recipe. You can really alter it in a lot of different ways. So, there you go. I hope this was something new for you guys. I have really been excited about this channel. I've had a lot of positive feedback. A lot of people are coming by. Please don't forget to subscribe and give me a few likes, and we'll see you next time. Until then, enjoy cooking.